This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Gas mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna cook a meal that's gonna make you mine. I'm turning up the oven, now we're ready to roast. When you touch me, honey, you'll love it the most. Come on and put me in a loving stew.
Welcome to another Britflix.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's guest is author Kate van der Borgh. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Now, in days gone by, we could have done this face-to-face, but since we first met each other and now that we get to talk about your debut novel, is that right, your debut?
Yes, that's right.
Your debut novel, which is called And He Shall Appear. I don't live in East London anymore, so we're doing this on a video call. So we're going to also talk about 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life, which will be fun. But before we do, let us talk about your book, And He Shall Appear. Before we go into any details, do you want to give a brief synopsis as to how you would describe the novel?
Yeah, sure. I sometimes call it a sort of ghost story. It's about a young man who's from a town in the north of England, a small town. He's an unnamed narrator, I should say. You never learn his name. And he has won a place at the University of Cambridge to study music. And when he arrives at his Cambridge college, he feels quite lost and out of place, like he doesn't fit in. And that's why he is very excited to cross paths with Bryn Cavendish. And Bryn is another student who is basically everything the narrator is not. He's charming and he's popular, and he comes from a wealthy private school background, and he's also a very talented amateur magician. So he does close-up magic for his pals when they have room parties and that kind of thing. And so the narrator is really glad to be in Bryn's orbit until he starts to suspect that there's something a little bit off about Bryn's magic tricks, and he starts to worry that they may have a genuine supernatural foundation to them. And I should say the story is a kind of dual timeline. So when you meet the narrator, he's actually 20 years out of university, and he's been invited back to college for an event. And although he wants to go, it's sort of bringing back all these memories of this very strange friendship that he had in this time when everything went wrong. And he's a bit scared to go back to college for this event, just in case something of the past is still waiting for him.
I'm so glad you confirmed unnamed narrator, because when I was getting ready, even though I'm halfway through the book, I was like, what's the main character called? And I thought, have I just missed this at the beginning? And I was frantically looking through the beginning, going, he's not in it. And then I kind of get a Google to see if I really had missed it. And then thanks to Goodreads, it tells me unnamed narrator. So, yeah, I mean, and that, in essence, that gives us that intimate subjective view that essentially just puts us into the heart of the story. Was it always that the narrator's point of view? Was it as part of your process of developing this story, was it ever third person looking from the outside in?
No, it was always first person. I think I knew it always had to be first person because so much of it is about the nuance of his thought processes and the sort of difficulty of him being frank with himself. You know, he's trying to face some uncomfortable truths in this story.
Yeah.
He's having to grapple with some things that he finds quite frightening and quite overwhelming. And I think, being inside his head was always going to be a big part of the story.
It reminded me of a book that I read that scared me equally, called "Satan Wants Me" by Richard Irwin, which is you're inside the mind of a man who has been experimenting with LSD and is looking back on a time of the people he hung out with, and he's not sure whether what he experienced was magic and LSD or did he meet the devil, kind of thing.
Oh, brilliant.
And I'm getting those vibes halfway into this, that obviously our unnamed narrator's going to lose his footing in terms of what everybody else understands is going on and what he thinks is going on.
Well, yeah, and I just think it's a really fascinating part of the human experience, this the sense of the unreliability of our own memories. And I think maybe, you know, it's that thing of I'm 20 years out of college myself now, and I am far enough out that those memories are quite murky now. And, you know, I have conversations with my friends where we remember events slightly differently. And it's that thing of, no, he said this and then she said that. And you start to slightly lose your grip on these things that were really foundational moments. And I suppose I'm just fascinated with what all that means in terms of, you know, your sense of self and how well we can ever truly know ourselves. And I find it fascinating and deeply unsettling in equal measure.
Now, as people may who recognise accents will know that I am Northern, as is Kate, like the unnamed narrator is. And while I didn't go to Cambridge, I went to what was Birmingham Poly, that then became the University of Central England, which I now believe is just called Birmingham City University. But nevertheless, when you come from a world that doesn't know higher education, you don't meet people from public school, which is a key part of the world. It's not just going to university that becomes our unnamed narrator's journey. It's these people and these traditions and these values and these habits and these just points of view that is completely alien to him, but he's having to absorb it. And I remember vividly, and I'll repeat the story that we were talking before we started recording. My first day, and a guy wearing a rugby shirt that's just a bit too small for him, and people from other schools recognised it as Marlborough's rugby shirt. So it wasn't an accident he was wearing that top. That was literally like a beacon for his tribe. So that leads me on to, given you were also someone who studied music at Cambridge, as our character does, how much fun did you have reliving those early uni days and also embellishing them into your wonderful fiction?
Oh, you know what? It's a very interesting question, because it was loads of fun in lots of ways to go back and dredge up the fun stuff. You know, there's a moment where someone goes to a formal dinner with a bath mat around their shoulders because they're dressed as a werewolf. And, you know, that's a thing that happened. That's a thing that one of my friends did. And the whole book is absolutely full of Easter eggs for my friends who were there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it did actually feel quite weird and a bit uncomfortable going back to that time when I felt very out of place. And, you know, that there is a lot of my experience in the narrator's experience. And like you, I was wandering around that place just feeling like I was missing something all the time. You know, even when people would ask what school I went to, it was a question that just didn't make any sense to me, because I was like, what, Habergam sixth form in Burnley? Like, why would you ask that? And it was kind of news to me that there would be loads of people from the same school, the same year, sometimes the same class, all going to Cambridge all at once. You know, this was really strange to me. And yeah, I guess it's part of the inspiration for the book, isn't it? That I used to watch certain people moving around the college, and they just knew this lingo, and they knew other people, and they knew how the debating society works, and they knew all these other societies and what they were and who was in charge of them. And to me, I was like, what is this sorcery? Like, it looks like a kind of weird magic. And I think this is why this book has emerged, with privilege as this kind of dark power that is sort of wielded by a select group of people. And it just looks like this secret knowledge to everyone who isn't in that inner circle. And you know what? I don't even want to be sort of critical of the individuals that I met. My husband, he went to private school. He's lovely. And I had loads of friends who went to private school, and they were fantastic people. It's more that it's like the world is set up in such a way that certain people can move through it really easily. Even down to the fact that, the dining hall, the way it looks, like for some people that looks really comfortable. You have your bran flags with all these oil paintings of the masters looking down on you. And for other people, that is deeply, deeply weird. And I don't know if you'll have got to this scene yet, but there's a scene in the book where the narrator admits to Bryn that, he's feeling a bit weird, having his breakfast in a hall like that is quite it's overwhelming for him. And Bryn says, oh, well, actually our school hall was even better than this one. So actually for me, it's a bit of a come down. And that's a real conversation I had. That's a real life conversation that I felt it was impossible not to put in the book. So it's this thing of just on a kind of big macro level, it's like the world is just built for some people to thrive in, and other people arrive and think, what the hell is going on? What is this?
Yeah, because I think what you do in a way, you kind of unwrap. It's the education part isn't the mystery. The bit that you've gone through life and the stress of exams, and the actual studying is not the thing that's difficult. It's navigating whatever's going on.
There's all the stuff around the edges, and you know what? There is a point where even the study becomes a bit weird. So I often think about how the Cambridge system is set up in that kind of tutorial system where you have small groups and everyone discusses ideas, and I really do think that the schools I went to did not want you to sit around and discuss ideas and sort of debate one another in the classroom and do all that. But there are schools where that is a really big part of the learning experience. And again, it means that some people are really well set up to thrive in that environment where, part of the thing is like speaking up and making yourself heard and taking up space. and for other people, that's a much bigger thing than you might think.
Now, if I can take you into like how you write. So when you're jostling with an idea, as it were, as you would have been with this novel, what's your process for developing sort of that spark that you have into ideas? What do you do? Are you outlining? Are you cards on the wall? Are you just random notes in books and then scrolling around trying to find them later? What's your process like?
I mean, I wish I had what could be called a process. With this book, certainly, I knew I had to have an idea of where it was going.
Okay.
So I'm one of those people who I'm not very good at just writing stuff and seeing what comes out.
Okay.
And sort of seeing what the characters do. Mm-hmm. And I'm not terribly good at the whole Stephen King thing of like put people in a situation and see how it unravels. I want to know what the landing is, essentially. Yeah. I want to know what I'm heading for. And so with this one, I had a sense of the ending. And actually that in itself gave me a lot of other sorts of big touch points. So for instance, if this is a story about a really profoundly affecting friendship, I had this sense that, well, there's probably going to be, a story of two halves here, in which one half is the sort of it's striving to build the friendship, and then the other half is the collapsing of that.
Yeah.
Sort of quite dangerous and frightening friendship. And so that gave me a sort of very broad structure to at least get started with. And then I'm one of those people, I sort of write all over the place. So one of the very first scenes I can remember writing comes really near the end.
Oh, wow.
And I will often pick scenes that I sort of think will probably have to be in there. So, if I know there's going to have to be some kind of confrontation scene, I might write a version of that, knowing that it's probably going to have to change quite a lot, but I'll have it as a placeholder, and then almost work out what needs to be in the in-betweens. And, I'm not necessarily recommending it as a
No. It's always interesting. Everyone has their own way. Everyone has their own way.
Yeah, and I had plenty of troubles with it. I know that yours you haven't quite got to the end yet, but you'll see at the end there are some quite thorny things in terms of plot. That there were some quite tricky things to navigate in terms of. There are lots of things that I wanted to appear to be quite ambiguous, and sort of making sure that worked all the way through the story was quite a task sometimes. But yeah, I would pick big scenes and write them and fill in the blanks. Which I was listening to Paul Tremblay, the horror author. He was talking about how he writes, and he does the opposite in that he will write. I think quite a lot chronologically, and he'll save the big scenes.
Oh, really?
As a treat, as something to look forward to. He doesn't want to do all the fun stuff first, and then fill in the blanks afterwards, which I thought was quite interesting. But I just dive in, write the things that I think will probably be important and exciting, and then deal with the rest later.
See, that's quite similar to. I mean, in a way, filmmaking gets made out of order. You don't shoot a movie linear at all. And also, I think because screenwriting, which is my bag, is that you more or less have to know the ending because of the format is restricted to say 120 pages. Whereas obviously a novel, you can write until you're finished, and admittedly, not everyone wants to read 500, 600, 1,000-page novels, but they exist, and nobody says that's bad. If I submitted a 250-page script to someone, they'd look at me like I had two heads. They go, come back when it's 90,
Yeah.
So you kind of have to know where you're going. One of the things that I took from the book, which I never thought I'd be taking from a book, because I'm a big fan of music, and the minute your character starts citing music, I thought, well, I'm going to have to listen to this while I'm reading. And
brilliant.
over the duration I've been reading it, I've become a fan of Peter Warlock, which is blown my mind. I didn't know anything about him, and obviously I'm learning from the book. Which then, obviously, he's a musician, but obviously his character, as part of your story, is a good foil for our main character to try and figure out what's going on, because he's got this example that he does understand.
Yes.
And then what's emerging becomes, hold on a minute, is this?
Yeah, he stands in for a lot, does Peter. I mean, he is an absolutely fascinating character. And I think, honestly, go away and just Google him and his life. And I came across him as part of my university studies. And for anyone who doesn't know, he was this composer writing in the early 20th century, and he's just this enormous character. He used to tell people that he was born on the embankment. He was actually born in a sort of swanky hospital, but he was this really kind of self-mythologizing character, and he was known for being this kind of beer swilling, very brash, quite abrasive character. He fell out with a lot of people. He had lots of arguments with slightly high profile people. And he was also known for riding naked on his motorbike through the village where he lived and offending all his respectable neighbours. But he starts out life as Philip Heseltine. Peter Warlock is a name that he adopts.
I was going to say, it seemed really brilliant for your story to have a guy called Peter Warlock.
Oh yeah, and he spends a year in Ireland, I think it is, when he gets he gets quite into the occult. And if you ever see pictures of him, he looks like the devil. He has like a neat little beard, and this sort of rakish look about him. But the reason I wanted to include him in this story is that, this is all on the surface of him, this character, this adopted name. Mm-hmm. But he's actually a really, he's also a very tragic figure. He has a friendship with the composer Delius, which lasts for much of his life.
Right.
They write to one another, I think from the time that Peter Warlock is a schoolboy.
Right, wow.
And he's a very, very talented schoolboy. And he's writing to this composer saying, I went to a concert of one of your works, and I think the conductor didn't necessarily conduct it right. And Delius will write back to him and say, "Yeah, you're right. It sounds like he didn't conduct it right." And he's really talented, but he can't ever quite get a grip. It's as if he can't quite find his place in the world. He wants to be a musician. He wants to be a composer. And he doesn't have as much money as he needs to kind of fulfill all his ambitions. Like I say, he's always falling out with people, and he dies very, very young. And the suspicion of a lot of people is that it is by suicide, and so he is this kind of dual character of this sort of devilish, rampaging, beer swilling kind of bloke on the one hand, and then on the other hand, this very tortured artist who produces, we haven't said yet, but produces the most beautiful music, the most stunning, fascinating music that kind of speaks across time. He's really into Elizabethan music, and he kind of combines this with really contemporary sound. And anyway, he just stands for so much in the book about identity and sort of time and this duality that you see in a lot of the characters. So anyway, if any one person is made a Peter Warlock fan by this book, then I will be absolutely delighted.
Well, there you go. That's the one has happened. So there can only be more now, Kate. There can only be more.
I hope so.
Well, look, thank you for sharing that about And He Shall Appear. It is out now, I should say to people, and I'll put links in the show notes and stuff where they can find it.
Amazing.
And it just gives us to now move on to 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life.
Oh, how exciting.
Right then, I'm just going to explain the rules of 3 films that impact everything in your adult life for those that may not have heard it before. Kate has very kindly given me a list of 3 films, which is the main part of it. I've limited it to 5 minutes per film as a chat, and every time we hear this sound, that will mean the 5 minutes are up, and then we'll close that film and move on to the next one. Does that make sense, Kate?
Makes sense.
Brilliant. Okay. I would say that Kate's first selection, the BBC switchboard took an estimated 1 million phone calls on the night of transmission. It's believed that the makers of Blair Witch saw it before they made their movie. And it's earned the dubious honour of being the first TV programme to be cited in the British Medical Journal as having caused post-traumatic stress disorder in children. The writer, Stephen Volk, who's been a guest on the podcast, wanted the story to go further, with Parkinson claiming the ghost is probably in your house. I am talking about Ghostwatch from 1992. So tell us, Kate, why is this film so memorable and has such an impact on you?
Well, I mean, other than all of the reasons you just listed. So I was always mad about ghosts as a child. So on Halloween night, 1992, when I was 9 years old,
brilliant,
I was one of the children who sat down to watch this show called Ghostwatch. And I remember the intro, it being billed as a live investigation into a supposedly haunted house in North London. And it was hosted, as you say, by Michael Parkinson, who was one of the biggest presenters of the day.
Why would you doubt Michael?
Exactly. He was this trusted presenter, and he was in the studio talking to experts about footage from this haunted house case. And then you would cut from there to Sarah Green, who was actually in the house itself with the family, running around with a cameraman and a sound guy, basically trying to catch a ghost. And obviously, now we know that this was a drama and all the scares were scripted. But I genuinely, like all of those other people, fell for it as a real thing. And I genuinely thought that what I was seeing on Ghostwatch, these hauntings, I genuinely thought it was real. Like that Orson Welles War of the Worlds thing.
It's that moment.
I was one of the many thousands and thousands of people who were taken in, and I don't think I've ever been so scared by anything I've ever seen on screen. And I guess there are a few things about it that made it so successful, I think, and that I still think about today.
Go on.
One of them is it really takes its time. You know, this is a 90-minute show, and for the first 45 minutes, it really allows the atmosphere to build. The pacing is amazing. You know, it almost feels at the start like this is one of those live broadcasts that's gone a bit wrong. You know, not very much is happening, except for these little breadcrumbs of weirdness, these things that you just glimpse at the very edge of your vision, where you think, like, did I just hear something? Or did I just see something over there? And it makes it so just unsettling, as if you're always you just feel just on edge. Like it won't release you from this low level tension until 45 minutes in, when it all just absolutely kicks off. And there's a pool of water, there's noises from the girl's bedroom, there's why can we hear cats screaming when there's no cats? And I don't know, I just think about it now, like writing my own stuff, that idea of having to manage the audience's response really carefully. And, you know, the scariest set piece will fall flat if you haven't sort of primed the reader or the viewer or whoever with this right atmosphere. And I guess, I was thinking about that with the book, this idea of really, really creating this sense of just nagging dread, this sort of very slow ratcheting tension. And I also think there is something about the extreme ordinariness of the whole setting in Ghostwatch it makes the horror so awful. So that format, you know, that just the classic TV format of the day, like you say, Michael Parkinson was a completely trusted face,
as was Sarah and Mike.
Sarah and Mike, Craig Charles running around. Everything is as you'd expect. There's the number on screen like you were used to. Like people could call in and tell their own stories. And even the house itself. So when I made my husband Leo watch this, sort of 30 years on from me watching it first time.
Yeah.
The thing he said that really freaked him out at the end, and he was freaked out by it. He said, like, the house is just so ordinary, and it just looks like a normal house. When I was watching it as a kid, it looked like the house that I was growing up in. And that idea of normal things becoming haunted, you know, it's one thing for a Gothic castle. Oh, my time is up.
Your time. Finish your thought.
It's, you know, it's one thing for a Gothic castle to be, you know, you watch a film about vampires or something, but you can tell yourself, well, at least I don't live in a Gothic castle. But when Michael Parkinson is telling you that there's something wrong with the TV broadcast, then that's a bit of a worry.
No, and to be honest with you, it's like you said, the build-up is the magic of it, and that's what I'm experiencing with your book, is that because the weird and the eerie and the uncanny don't need to be big Belisha beacons. They just need to be just a bit off from what you're... It's almost like, when you glance out your eye, you're always expected to see normal things. And if what you say at your corner eye is just slightly askew, that's enough. Yes. And if it happens 5 times, you're like, no, there's something not right now. And that's kind of what, I guess, what Ghostwatch set up lovely, didn't it?
It's so beautifully. Yeah, this sense that something is just a bit wrong. So that when it goes really wrong, you are absolutely, you're done for.
Okay, well, look, thank you for that. We shall move on to your second choice, which is tonally somewhat different. For your second...
another horror film, practically. In some way.
Well, look, Pete Orty is the singer of the iconic song Walking in the Air that is often mistaken for Ali Jones's version, which was a single 3 years later, which was news to me before I started researching this. This film has been repeated on TV every year except 1984 since it was broadcast. I couldn't find out why. When it was first aired in America, they introduced David Bowie. So they replaced Raymond Briggs with David Bowie because he wasn't famous enough. So it was kind of a bit of star power at the beginning. I'm talking about Snowman, the film that's based on the popular wordless book by Raymond Briggs. And other than the song, the introduction and the lyrics to the song Walking in the Air, there are no words in the movie either. So tell us, what is it about the Snowman from 1982 that's held long in the memory for Kate?
Oh, the Snowman. I need to give you a bit of context for this one. So
Please do.
When I was a very small child, I was looked after day to day by my Auntie Iris and my Uncle Fred, because both my parents were at work.
Mm-hmm.
And my mum has said that Auntie Iris was like a second mother to me. And anyway, one day when I was when I think I was 2, she died very suddenly in that way that, one day she was there and then the next day she wasn't, and I never saw her again.
Okay.
And I don't remember her at all, but I am left with a deep horror of people leaving or people saying goodbye. I really hate saying goodbye to people, even now, all these years on. I guess, on some level, in case I'm worried that they're never going to come back either. So imagine how I felt when, at probably the age of 4 or something, I watched this film about this little boy who has this sort of magical evening with his snowman friend and then wakes up in the morning to find him gone. It's genuinely a film. I have a visceral reaction to this film. I have a sinking feeling. If I hear this, if someone has this film on at Christmas, I have a reaction in my body because it makes me anxious about what is going to happen. And, you can feel the snowman's wonderment as he's sort of having this lovely time in the house, being delighted by the fruit bowl and the television set. And at the same time, a lot of the music is really quite mournful.
Yeah. Because,
the snowman knows he's on borrowed time. He knows that the sun's coming on. And I'm sure that it's the music that does it to me. As beautiful as the images are, this gorgeous, the animation, the sort of pencil crayon style, as gorgeous as it is, I'm sure it's the music that gives me that visceral reaction when I hear it, because it just takes me back to being a child. And, that ending, I remember I would watch this film all the way up to the last minute. And the moment at which the little boy gets out of bed in the morning and goes out to see his snowman, I would jump up off the sofa and run over to the tape player and stop it and rewind it, because I could. I mean, this is like, the final shot that I couldn't handle it. It's like the Blair Witch Project. It's like my first ever Blair Witch experience. I cannot see this final shot. And I think it just takes me back. That's how it makes me feel. It makes me, when I hear that music, I want to run and stop the ending from happening. And Raymond Briggs was quite frank about saying that this is a story about death, and not in a grim way, but death is just part of life, and we all have to experience it. And I do think it's really bold that they don't try and soften it. You know, that there's no sly wink at the end that, you know, maybe the snowman's not really gone, or maybe he's coming back. They just leave you on this absolute sucker punch of an ending. And it's brutal.
I want to go on the record here and say I think that might be the first time that the ending of Blair Witch and the ending of The Snowman have ever been drawn as parallel lines. I
don't know what's the worst final shot. I can't decide.
That's brilliant. I love that. I was like, this is not, because when you said it's horrible, I'm thinking, is it horrible? But then when you put it in those, when you describe The Snowman in those terms, yeah, it's a fatalistic film that's going to, the destiny of this film is only one way, is that daylight and sunlight is going to be the end of the snowman.
Yeah, and you know, I'm exaggerating a bit for comic effect, you know, but it's deeply sad, you know, rather than horrific. It's deeply sad, and I do kind of think I actually do think the best kind of horror films are a bit sad as well.
But it's interesting how much of that is communicated from a wordless book and b a wordless film. You know, it speaks to the you know, given what he was trying to do, it speaks to a universality of how we do view loss and death and stuff. And now, if we can treat it as normal as we can, then it can be normal, for want of a better expression.
Yeah, totally. And that thing of, you know, when we're coming up with stories, you know, you don't need to shy away from writing about those big universal experiences, because they are that, you know, that's what they are. That's why they move us all, and it's you don't have to worry about it not feeling original or trying to come up with some, you know, these are the big things that,
absolutely,
that stay with us.
Right then, we are on to your final choice. Director Jordan Peele said that this is one of the movies that scared him the most. That is a faux horror documentary written and directed by Joel Anderson, who would go on to work in the continuity script department on 2023's A Late Night with the Devil, which obviously if you've seen that movie, owes a great debt to Ghostwatch. I am indeed talking about late 2008's Lake Mungo. So tell us.
Well, you know, speaking of horror that is sad as well as scary, I am obsessed with this film because I think it's really affecting, just as a simple classic ghost story about a family tragedy, you know, where this teenage daughter has drowned in a terrible accident, and her mom, dad, and brother now believe that she is haunting them. And you know, it also features lots of the stuff we've talked about, that sort of idea of things glimpsed at the edge of your vision, these sort of shadows just on the edge of your sight, that very unsettling stuff. It also does it does a thing that Ghostwatch does too, actually.
What's that?
It gives you a moment where it appears that all the hauntings you have seen are a hoax. It allows you to sort of think that, oh, it's all been a trick, and just as you're lulled into this false sense of security, it then reveals that actually the hoax story doesn't explain everything away, and maybe the most sinister stuff is still to come. And it's weird. It actually makes me think of magic tricks, because have you ever seen magicians often do this as well? You know, they'll be doing a trick in a routine, and there'll be a moment where it feels like something's gone wrong, or, you know, the card that they've revealed is the wrong card or something, and things seem to be a little bit flat. And then I'm sure Derren Brown has spoken about this, actually.
Yeah.
And after this sort of supposed mistake, there's this moment of the final flourish, and actually, ta-da! This was a deliberate mistake, and you've dropped your guard, and now you've missed the sleight of hand or whatever it is, and here's the big reveal. And I don't know, I just feel like there's something, there's some kind of brilliant crossover between writing and magic there, and even about misdirection and things like that, where, you know, if you're writing and you want to include a detail that you want to hide it from your audience, you can't just simply not mention it. you have to sort of play a piece of misdirection and put something else in their heads instead. I don't know. I feel like there's something a little bit magical going on with the writing.
Well, I mean, because the trick with Lake Mungo is like, whereas, I don't know, with Blair Witch, you've got found footage, you've got somebody has gone missing, we've found the evidence of what they discovered, let's piece it together. Lake Mungo is a story told by someone that's made a documentary in the movie. You've not found evidence of someone who's disappeared. We're watching someone's a supposedly authored piece of work. So then when the camera is holding on something and we're not sure what we're meant to look at, we're suddenly very uncomfortable because we've been used to a talking head here and a shot of the lake there, and then suddenly we're being asked to peer into a room because something's happening which wasn't planned as part of the documentary. So the documentarian is responding to their environment now, not just the story. Yeah,
it's so sinister. And I mean, for me, the big thing about Lake Mungo for me is how it handles time. And, you know, this being a story that's all about time, this girl who feels like something bad is going to happen to her and has also simultaneously happened to her already.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, there are moments where you have people talking about the same scene from different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's as if their timelines, these characters' timelines, don't match up. And it makes me think of stuff like All of Us Strangers or Field of Dreams, where that's the opposite, where the films allow characters' timelines to match up in such a way that, you know, you, the son, can speak to your father when you're both 30 years old and you can both understand one another better.
Yeah.
But I feel like Mungo is doing the opposite in this very smart way of just keeping people apart, you know, these moments in time.
Finish your thought.
And I think that's why it's such a frightening film in the end, because what it leaves you thinking in that case is, you know, with this feeling of, you know, what if the people we love most of all are always just slightly out of reach? What if we will never connect with them and see things the same way? You know, what if we'll never manage that and we'll always just be a little bit estranged from one another, which again, you know, is as scary as any ghost, any haunting, you know, that sort of reality of human experience.
And that plays into the idea, the ghost theory that we're all just vibrations in all the molecules and atoms that exist. So ghosts are just stray reverberations of making something from the past reappear in the present. You know, there's that.
Yeah. Time is terrifying. Time is just genuinely the most terrifying concept. So I just love any film that sort of deals with it.
Did you see the film A Ghost Story then, where it looked at an approximate place in time and you went through all the ghosts that have lived in the house?
No, I don't think I have seen that.
I would recommend that. I'll say no more, not to spoil it, but it's a cracking film. It's got Casey Affleck in it, but he wears a ghost hood, so it wasn't star power. It's a bit like when Fassbender was Frank.
In the big head.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you very much for sharing those memories with the three films that have impacted everything in your adult life. And thank you for sharing that bit of insight into And He Shall Appear, your debut novel.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a load of fun.